I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're taking a deep dive into the raw and compelling narrative of a book called The Spare, Part 1, by Marsha Sumpter. Born and raised on a working ranch in South Dakota, Marsha's memoir unfolds the harsh realities of rural life, the pain of growing up with challenging choices, and the journey towards self-discovery. It is a story that promises to resonate with anyone who's ever faced adversity, and that's everyone just about, and it offers insights into the impacts of our decisions on our futures. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below this interview. Marsha, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much, Logan. It's great to see you too.
And I'm glad you're still living in beautiful South Dakota. Today it's a sunny day there. It feels like spring is right around the corner, right?
Exactly. But we aren't putting the snow equipment away quite yet.
Oh, no, that would be a mistake. I think you might
It
have
would.
snow up until about May 9th. But
We've had it until June 8th even.
I believe it. I believe it. Yep, it's like that. I also spent a lot of time up in Maine, and don't put away that snow plow. Don't take the chains off the tires just yet. Otherwise, they'll be fooling you. So what made you
Exactly.
decide to tell your story in a book, Marsha?
Well, when my mother passed away, she had a lot of information that she'd saved. She was a great keeper of papers.
Mhm.
And as she would write things to my aunts and uncles, my one particular aunt saved these correspondence and passed them back to her.
Mm.
So I had the original writings of my mother on a lot of the things that I put in my book. And my grandmother on my dad's side was very good at writing up things. So between the two of them, I secured a lot of papers that maybe other people would throw away.
Yeah. And that's
And
in part the basis of your book?
it's how I got started. I started this crazy thing about 15 years ago,
Yeah.
and the stinking technology kept changing on me from those little quarter-inch floppy disks, and this
Yep.
computer went out and that one went away, and I'd get stymied on ifs and buts about how to keep going with it, and saved some and did lost others and
Yeah.
kept restarting. You know how that goes. And
Sure.
finally, I got to a point where I thought, if I don't do something with this pretty soon, it's going to all be lost.
Right.
And so that started the first book. Most people would write them all together, but I'm not that creative, I guess. And so I just sort of took the spring and the summer and the fall and now the winter of my life.
Mm. So each season is a different book.
It is, like you have different versions of your life
Sure.
too.
Sure.
As a young person, that's what the Spare Part 1 is as I grew. And then my first married life. And then we went back to my farm and ranch, which I couldn't wait to get away from when I was a kid,
Right.
and put in a lot of years there. And now we're here in Kadoka, and I lost my husband. So
Sorry.
that's part of life. That's
Yeah,
the winter of our lives.
exactly. Exactly. So let's start with the spring. Growing up on a ranch, on a farm in South Dakota, to a lot of people today, it sounds like, wow, that's ideal. It's beautiful. It's, nature. But there are some hardships, of course, when you're raised on a farm in a rural area in the middle of the country in a harsh climate. So tell us a little bit about the springtime of your life.
Well, as we were growing up, as soon as you could do a chore, you were out doing it, whether
Mhm.
it be gathering the eggs, cleaning the chicken house, which everybody hated. The old outhouse behind the house was a terrible place to have to go to in the wintertime.
Oh,
No
yeah.
heat. And you had to brush the snow off the seats, don't you know, because they had little moons cut in it so that it'd get ventilation. And
Right.
and
Man.
so when you see a storm on the television or something and you see all this snow built up and such, those ranchers are out there in it to save their livestock. They can't, they don't stay home and wait for the storm to subside. They have to be there protecting the animals.
Yeah.
And that's, my cousins came from Washington one time, and they saw me in the field, and I'm full of dirt and grease and grime and whatever. And I got my hair in curlers because it's Saturday and I'm going to go to town for Saturday night.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Everything always is romanticized a little bit when you look at something like rural life on a farm, but it is tough. Like you said, going to the bathroom in an outhouse, having to work from the time you're able to walk, basically. In many ways, though, didn't that build strong character? I mean, my mom was a tough mom. My mom was a generation older than all my friends' moms. So she put me to work at a young age. She had, we didn't have the heat on very high in the house, that kind of stuff. You got used to, life today is so easy. Everything's climate controlled and protected. And, there was something that made you a better person from growing up in that environment. Don't you think, Marsha?
It gives you a lot of strength that we're not giving to our young people today.
Absolutely not.
We are making them too soft, and they can't cope with reality. They think they have to have everything new and right now instead of waiting to accumulate it over a period of time. And it's hard to think about letting those poor little stinkers go in there so unprepared for life.
Yeah, right. They're raised like hothouse flowers. They're raised like, delicate little saplings that we have to be careful of, instead of your mom saying, get out there, Marsha, and, clean out the chicken coop. I don't care if it smells like hell, get it cleaned, right?
Oh boy, you cleaned it and you bedded it down and you made sure the nests were always clean so the eggs didn't get broken. And those eggs were sort of important. We sold them to get a few groceries, We didn't milk enough cows to sell milk, but we'd always milk, and the milk would go into a gallon jar, and then Mom would skim the cream off.
Right.
And that's what we'd make our butter with.
Right.
And she did. We had goats for a while later on in life, and she'd make butter with the goat cream. You could always taste it.
Yeah. I'm sure it tasted delicious, right?
Well, goat butter wasn't that great.
Goat butter was probably a little bitter, right?
Yeah. It had a taste to it, but the cow butter was always good.
Right. But I'm sure it would bring you back if you had a nice hot biscuit with some goat butter on it right now. You'd be like, this doesn't taste so bad. This tastes pretty good. It brings me back to a different time. What did you guys do for heat? Did you have only a fire going, or was it coal, or how did you keep your house warm?
Well, we had wood. We cut a lot of wood out of the creek, and we were fortunate. My grandmother settled along the creek, and we had what was called Plum Creek there. So it would be harvested, so we'd have wood, and then we had some coal to bank it up too.
Right.
And that was a big stove in the basement, and then they had registers on the floor to let the heat rise.
Yeah.
And then upstairs in our bedrooms, we had little tiny registers. So it was usually colder than a son of a gun in the wintertime and hotter than Hades in the summer.
Exactly. Yeah, I live in an old house now, and it's like that. It's blazing hot upstairs and cold downstairs. And it's just part of it when you live in a 200-year-old house or whatever. But
aren't you blessed?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you, when you were growing up, did you enjoy it? Were you like, oh, I can't wait to get off the ranch? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we did what we had to do, and Dad was pretty strict with us. And so, we weren't, none of us were really tied to the ranch very much.
Yeah.
It just appeared to be a lot of work and always dirt poor.
Yeah.
There was never enough money to do a lot of things. You always had to have a tie with the banker.
Right.
Dad told about sending my mom and my grandmother to the sheep sale. at Faith. And he said, now don't let them bring home a half a truckload of sheep. You know, there's so many sheep will fit in a semi pot or whatever. So when Mom and Grandma came back, they had 7 pot loads of sheep.
Wow.
And Dad didn't have the money for it. So he had to call up the banker and say, you know, Ruth went to the sale for me today, and I need this much money to cover the check she wrote for these sheep at the auction. And Dad said the banker took a deep sucking breath on the phone, and finally he said, okay, Wayne, I'll cover it for you.
Wow. Wow. Thank God for, in an era like today, that wouldn't happen.
No,
You know what I mean?
Your bank would want your whole life history and
exactly. It'd be a formal application, and the bank guy would tell you, sorry, it's not my decision, it's the policy of the bank. But yeah, things were done on a handshake back then. And it was a different way. And thank God for it, because it helped us get by. I know for that. I mean, I remember the little grocery store in my neighborhood growing up. We had a little charge account at the store where you could say, go in, pick up groceries and charge it. Yeah. And they just write it down, a little note that the Crawfords owe, $27 now or whatever it is. But it's a different time. Why did you call part 1 The Spare? Tell me about that.
Well, when Mom and Dad had their 2 boys already, and my aunt advocated population 0. Which meant have 1 child to replace each of the adults. And they already had it. And Mom was in an argument. She said, what if one of them dies or something happens bad, and then we'll only have 1? So she debated quite frequently with Dad, and he agreed to have 1 more before he had a vasectomy back in 1944.
Wow, that's pretty progressive.
I would say so. Yeah. That just sort of blew me away. But then I was the spare.
That's
so
funny.
In later life, Mom would say, I'm sure glad we had the spare.
That's funny. So it was just you and your brother?
No, 2 brothers.
2 brothers. Okay.
2 brothers. Yeah.
But that's, for a ranch family, that's a relatively small family.
Yes, for my dad, it was a very small family, because he came from a family of 9.
Right, because you need the ranch hands. You need the kids to do the work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One of my uncles, when he was fed up with Grandma and Grandpa Shy and was ready to embark on his own, he didn't say a word about leaving, but somebody saw him sitting on the tractor seat on the train headed west.
Wow.
And they told him, they said, well, Uncle Barney or Barney's on his way west. We don't know where, but
that's funny. That's funny. Yeah. What a great time. What decades were this? What decade were you born in?
What decade?
Yeah, were you born in the 40s?
43.
43, yeah. Yeah.
43, yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So you were born just as World War I was about, World War II,
World War II was just finishing.
Yeah. Amazing.
And for them to take on even youngsters then, it was quite a deal. My dad was in the CCC camp as a young person, and because he was in agriculture, they valued that in the old days. You know what I'm saying? And so if you weren't in the military, but you went to work for the CCC, because there were so many soup kitchen and people out of work and no money.
Right.
And they would have to send their whole paycheck home and get $1 to keep a month for themselves.
Amazing.
But he got room and board there.
Yeah.
They fed him, and they had a tent to sleep in.
Right. Right. And like I said, and like we were saying in the earlier part of this interview, today kids would feel like, or young adults would feel like they were being penalized for having to sleep in a tent, right? Or abused. Exactly.
That's a word that's too easily used.
Oh yeah, exactly. If I speak harshly to you, I'm abusing you. Yeah, abused is an abused word. That's for sure. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah, without a doubt. Okay, so your part 1 takes you up to about what age when you leave the ranch?
17.
Right.
I was out and went to school in Rapid City at that time.
Mhm.
And then I met Bill.
Yeah.
And we found out we were in a family way.
That's great.
And back then they didn't have kids first and then decide if they wanted to stick together. It was,
Right.
okay, we know we're going to stick together.
Right, right, exactly. And so that's where part two begins when you're leaving the ranch and you're expecting a child with Bill.
Yep, yep. And
Yep,
that's where part two comes in.
great.
And then part three kicks in for when we get a call from the folks and say, we're either going to sell out or one of you kids has got to come home.
Hmm.
And
Interesting.
both of the brothers had tried it and didn't make it.
Right.
So that meant the spare and her family was going to try it.
Exactly. Well, let's not skip over book two. So you're expecting a child with Bill, you get married, and tell me a little bit about, getting married and starting a family.
Well, you know what? As young, irresponsible adults,
Mhm.
which we proved to be, Bill liked his beer and he
Right.
smoked cigarettes, and I didn't smoke, and two of us couldn't afford beer. So, so in order to keep groceries in the refrigerator, I didn't drink at all.
Right.
And I got I went to business college after, so long of putting up with alcohol and irresponsible behavior. And it's like, can I do this or should I make arrangements for something else?
Hmm.
So I went to business college, and that was a 9-month course. And in between, I'd get a job. I found a good babysitter, and even drove a school bus for a while to
Wow.
make ends meet.
Yeah.
And when I got done with the business course, I went to work for an attorney.
Hmm.
And I thought to myself, okay, does Bill want perfumed divorce papers or what?
That's
But we
fun.
wrote it out.
Oh, okay. So you had a tough patch there. You thought it was going to be all over, but you were able to get through. Well, it's the stress of not having enough money, children. I mean, a lot of couples go through this. And the difference today and back then was you stuck it out. You got
Yeah,
through the hard time. Today most people would have served the divorce paper and been on their second or third marriage within a couple of years, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
I took pot shot at him one night with I had bird shot in the revolver sitting on the counter, and
that's funny.
and I was so disgusted with him. He came dragging home another fellow. They'd both been drinking, and I stepped out the door and fired a couple of shots, and the flame shot out of the gun, because it was bird shot. And the other guy
Right.
dove under the car. I had to take him home. He wasn't in any shape to stay with us.
That's so funny. That's so funny. So you're able to keep the marriage together. Did you have more than one child?
Did we have what?
How many children did you have? Just the one or
Oh,
more?
two daughters,
Two
two
daughters.
daughters,
Okay. Gotcha.
and they both of them have provided us with 4 grandchildren over the
Wonderful.
years, and
That's
then we've
great.
got 10 great grandchildren, and one great great going to be coming up the 19th of March.
Well, that's awesome. That's wonderful. It's good to see that the Sumpters are alive and well in South Dakota, and I'm sure beyond at this point as well. So, how old were your kids when you got the call that mom and dad need you to come and take over the farm?
Well, they were like third grade and fifth grade. They were in teenagers, 12 and 15, about, or 13, 11 and 13,
Right.
somewhere in that neighborhood.
Yep.
And it was like, do we want to take them and bring them down there? Or they liked horses, and so every so often we'd go bring the horses up so they could be in 4-H in Rapid City, and
Mhm.
and being in 4-H was a good thing for them. And we raised chickens in a cardboard box in our house in Rapid for a while until they got bigger. Then
Mhm.
we took them down to the farm to let them finish growing and brought them back to show them. And the silly thing flew over the fence in Rapid City. I put
Mm.
a notice out on the radio looking for it. And somebody called me with it.
Wow.
We got the chicken back.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
But
That's a funny story. But you got the chicken back. So when your kids are like 11 and 14 or 11, 15, that kind of thing, did you wind up moving back to the ranch?
we went back to the ranch and became hard laborers. We gave up two paying jobs to come back for about the same as one wage.
Wow.
But they did furnish us with a house and pay the utilities. Of course, we gave up any pensions because that wasn't something the farm and ranchers did or could afford.
Right.
And fought for health insurance just to try and keep things on the equilibrium, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we delve into it, and I guess maybe my background of bookkeeping and working for the attorneys was beneficial. And Bill went in when we were in Rapid, and he got a mechanic's job. He went to school, and he was working at Frontier Ford, where they sort of gave a pension, which was unknown. In the 70s, they started doing that, you know.
Yeah.
And he had health insurance through that. So it was a sort of a, dang, we're giving up quite a bit to go down here, but somebody's got to do it.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So you go back home, you make the best of the ranch. Bill gets a job. Things are better with the marriage. Is Bill drinking a little bit less, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, you know, he was. And then one day, Dad sold all the cattle, and he really liked the cattle, Bill did. And after the sale, he vanished for 3 days. I had no idea where he was, what had happened, or anything. And when he came back, he didn't drink again.
Wow.
You know, he said he'd been to an AA meeting up there in Rapid City, and he just turned around and changed his life.
That's great. That's great. That's what's great about us people is we can change, you know?
You
we
just
can
have to
turn
make
it all
your
around.
mind up to it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you make your mind up to it. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
And
well, that's great.
Bill, Bill was a strong-minded person, and you know, I hated to spend the money on those stinking cigarettes every day, every time.
Right.
And,
did he stop smoking also?
You know what? He told me, he said, when I'm 50, I'll quit. And I said, yeah, right. And when he turned 50, he never touched another cigarette.
That's great. That's great.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. It is amazing. And because they say that's harder to stop than drinking cigarettes, because nicotine's so addictive, you know?
Yeah, or if you switch from cigarettes to chew, then the chew is harder to get rid of.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. None of it's good. All of it's addictive, but it's great. He stuck to his word. He was done by 50. So at what point did you leave the farm or the ranch?
Well, my folks gifted it to the three of us. Do you believe that? You know, they gave us the whole place, 7,000 acres. And the two brothers,
7,000 acres. That's amazing.
7,000 acres. Bill and I managed it for all those years, 29 years. And then the two brothers got together and they decided to sell us out.
Oh.
2 against 1. And Mom said, well, can't you save
Couldn't they left you on 100 acres of it? You know what I mean?
You know, Mom thought about that too. She said, couldn't you save 2,200 acres or, you know, make it split? But you couldn't make a living on that.
Right.
You know, it wasn't enough. And unfortunately, ranch and farmland sells by the acre. It doesn't matter what your buildings are on it.
Right.
It goes with it.
Right.
And so when it was all said and done, Mom and Dad could have sold it for $300 an acre back in 1975, put the money out on interest and investments and made several million.
Right.
And as it was, we didn't get near that.
Really?
We got about $267 an acre by the time they gave away the crop in the field with it, and gave away, well, by the time we paid the realtor, you know, that was a big chunk of change, and the seller pays that. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It was, and then 3 years later, that same land sold for $1,000 acre across the fence from us. Yeah,
Frustrating, frustrating. When it comes to families and dividing property, it's always a nightmare. I don't think there's ever a good outcome.
it is.
But
Mom and Dad thought they'd pretty well taken care of it. They set up a corporation.
right.
They, had everything funneled into it, and they set up a trust so that, they were trying to make sure that the longevity of the farm was going to keep going.
Yeah.
And it's so sad that it didn't.
Yeah, because that
It,
was their legacy, and you were trying to continue it, and you had invested 3 decades on that farm. So,
we had,
like I said, when it comes to estates and when it comes to splitting up inheritance, usually none of it's good. So, it's kind of a
I know
typical story, unfortunately. I've seen it in a lot of families.
it.
So you guys leave the ranch, and where do you go?
Well, we moved to Kadoka, which was about our farm and ranch was 28 miles from Philip,
Mhm.
24 north and 4.5 west, and out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And when we were looking for a place, I had started up a little sign business in the basement because one night I told Bill, I said, I don't know if I've been listening to late night TV or what, but I need something to replace my pigs. And so I ordered this online, this computer and a plotter to start doing a sign business.
Oh, okay.
And it was in the basement at the farm. So when I wasn't doing farm work, I could take in a little stuff and earn a little money. So when we were looking for a place to establish, Mom was 2 miles north of Philip on a little ranchette of 236 acres that Dad had bought. And it was funny how he bought that, because he called me up one day and he said, go offer this guy this much money for this property north of Philip. And I said, Dad, where's Mom? And he said, never mind where Mom is, just go make that offer. So they were living out there, and when Dad passed away, and so we wanted someplace close to where Mom was, because we were the only ones still in South Dakota. And we saw a house over here in Kadoka that was 5 bedrooms and, had a huge hallway in the basement. And I said to Bill, well, I could put my little sign business in there,
Mm-hmm.
And so we brought Mom over and showed it to her, and she said, haven't you bought it yet? She said, the roads are better than going to the farm and
That's
about the
great.
same distance. So we ended up over here in Kadoka, and
Awesome.
Bill tried, well, we knew we needed to have some kind of income,
Right.
because the farm, if you spend the principal, pretty soon you have nothing.
Right.
And what we got, we had to pay taxes out of, and so on and so forth. And so he went to work for any farmer that would have him hired.
Right.
And he had about 4 of them that lined up to grab him. And so he was kept busy that way. And I tried to drum up more business for my sign business. And our insurance for health ran us about $1,900 a month with a $6,000 deductible.
Wow. Wow.
So we were scrambling to try and keep the insurance okay, because Bill had had open heart surgery before that, had some stents, all of that cigarettes and beer must not have helped him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my dad stopped at 50 also, and by the time he stopped at 50, it was like a little too late, You do a lot
Yeah.
of damage with those cigarettes. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing journey. We're delighted that you captured it all in your series of memoirs. Marsha Sumpter has written 4 books, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, basically spring, summer, fall, winter of her life. And each of the books, as you can hear from the story she tells, have fascinating aspects to them. And it's a fascinating story. It's a life well lived. The book we primarily focused on today is called The Spare, Part 1. It's about her early life, working, living, being raised on a ranch in South Dakota. It tells kind of how tough it was to grow up on a farm back then. but it's a great, great life, and it's a great, great story. And we're so happy that Marsha shared her time with us here today on Spotlight. Marsha, thank you for joining us.
And thank you very much for the interview. You've been wonderful to talk to, Logan.
Oh, I enjoyed speaking with you as well. I could talk to you all afternoon. It's easy to do.
Call me up later and we'll have a good chat.
I'll do that. I'll do that. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.